This podcast was brought to you by Uncertainty. At least I think it was.
Hello and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader.
And so here we are in 2017, and like I said in my VCT New Year video, I'm sure many people would be happy to see the back of last year for multiple reasons.
Yeah, as December proved, 2016 just couldn't leave well enough alone.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we better not dwell on this because it's a new year, new positivity, and I don't want my video disliked anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we already cut enough for the comments we made in the Les Mis video, so, you know.
The only thing I've gotten more for is the one time I reviewed RWBY Season 3. Man, the dislikes on that video. Anyway.
I wonder what they would think of the fact that we both actually almost kind of maybe unironically like RWBY Season 4.
Yeah, that's actually been a big improvement, but that's for another video. Like I said, positivity today with the game, so let's start with
Q&A!
This is the section where we answer questions from the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion. Something I'm encouraging you all to do because we do have a backlog, but it's getting kind of low now, and to be honest, this month's Q&A is going to be using up the last batch of questions from Infinity Zero and Toon Junkie. So, with that in mind, Sven, take it away.
Our first question comes from IZ.
What's the creepiest bad ending you've gotten in a game?
That's difficult for me to say because I'm very, very strongly make a point of not getting bad endings. Also, I spoil myself to death.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. I mean, I usually try to avoid bad endings whenever I can. I mean, I can mention some creepy bad endings that I've seen, but I've yet to actually get them. I'm not trying to brag, it's just I've yet to get a bad ending.
Yeah, the thing is, that's why I say that I spoil myself to death. I look at games ahead of time, and if there's a bad ending, I will do everything in my power to avoid it.
I mean, there have been, like, one or two instances, like, Minish Cap, just before the final boss battle, there's a section that is timed, and I basically got that and had to watch Princess Zelda be doomed, and of course there's stuff like Donkey Kong 64, where if you just chose to quit the game, that played the game over screen where K. Rool blew up DK Island, but yeah, aside from game overs, that's really the closest I've gone to bad endings.
Wait, actually, no, I take my previous comments back. There was a bad ending that I got that was basically the catalyst for me never getting another bad ending again. Ogre Battle 64. First of all, may I just say Chaos Frame?
Oh, God.
Second of all, may I just also say that this bad ending involves the hero of the game, Magnus, being turned into a pariah who is not allowed into any form of civilization in Palatinus, and as a result, in order to get anywhere, he has to kill the 4 Zenobian heroes. So you can understand why, with hindsight, that ending had kind of an effect on 8-year-old me. Also, once again, Chaos Frame.
Yeah, oh god, that whole chaos system was so ridiculous. I mean,
it was so stupid.
I mean, I explained this in my very old Ogre Battle 64 review, but you know what, I'm just going to play a clip from past me, which is my attempt to explain Chaos Frame.
Chaos Frame is an off-screen meter, but it has a big impact on the game. The only confirmed way to raise it is to make sure that you liberate a village instead of capturing it. Now, to liberate a village, you have to make sure that the alignment of your unit between Chaos and Lawful is at the right point to match a village's morale. A unit's alignment often changes depending on who they fought, so you have to make sure that your units fight the enemies at the right level and the right alignment. And it's this entire system which not only decides your ending, but also decides what characters will be available to you. And it's a system which I can sum up with one sound.
I mean, yeah, that's from one of my younger reviewers where I did tend to hype things up, but really, that system was so ridiculous. I only just managed to avoid the bad ending. And that's because I suddenly looked it up halfway through the game and realised, wait, oh, right, okay, let's get...
So at the very last possible second, you had to scrounge together enough Chaos Frame to get the neutral ending.
Yeah, thankfully it was the second half, but I was only able to just do it, especially since on the last chapter, the guys I had used to liberate the villages, as opposed to capturing them, had fought so many demons that their valor level, whatever the crap it was, went down, so they were completely useless and ended up capturing the damn thing.
Comedy of errors, folks. Ogre Battle 64 in a nutshell.
Yeah, that is literally the closest thing I can think of. So, yeah, sorry for that anticlimactic answer, but that's kind of the truth. We usually do everything we can to avoid bad ending.
Where's Saps? Yeah.
By contrast, the next question from IC is something I'm sure we can talk about at great lengths.
Favorite and least favorite death battles?
Oh boy. I should have known this question was going to come up.
Yeah, admittedly, when IZ first asked us about whether or not we watched the show Death Battle, which, quick explanation for those who didn't see that episode or know what Death Battle is, basically, Screw Attack gets two fictional characters, does a heavily detailed analysis of their origin story and what their skills are, and then sets them in battle, kind of like the Deadliest Warrior, just to see who would win. And yeah, IZ already asked us about it, and we said we are fans of the show, but the reason we didn't do like an official list is because, well, at the time, Season 3, and I believe, actually it might have been even Season 2 at that point, was still ongoing, and our list kept changing every time a new Death Battle was out, so...
Yeah, I mean, like we said, we're fans of the show, and we at one point actually did attempt to do a countdown relating to this subject, but... Well, for one, we always, for some reason, forget that we actually did our side projects outside of Monkey Broadcast, and for two, like Jonin said, the list kept changing.
Yeah, but this is now a good time to do it, because at the time of recording, Season 3 is being wrapped up, and it's not being released till February, so I don't have to advance it in post. Well, hey, so... So we might as well get started with some of our favourites now. On my end, I would say some of my favourites are Goku vs Superman the original, Iron Man vs Lex Luthor, Dante vs Bayonetta, Ken vs Terry, and Solid Snake vs Sam Fisher. I'm sure there were some others, but those are the best ones I can think of off the top of my head. Sven?
I'm disappointed, Jonin, you forgot to mention DK vs Knuckles.
Oh yeah, that was something.
You forgot Donkey Kong. How could you?
I'm sorry.
But yeah, for me, all of those plus DK versus Knuckles, kind of Cloud versus Link, but the less we talk about Link's Pegasus Boots animation, the better. Raiden versus Wolverine. I am one of the only people apparently on planet Earth who liked Gaara versus Toph, but that's because I'm a fanboy. Also, Chuck Norris versus Segata Sanshiro, because I'm into insanity.
Indeed. Also, I'm disappointed in you, Sven. You forgot Jak and Daxter versus Ratchet and Clank.
Oh, well, okay, fair dues, we're now equal.
Also, two ones that were goofy, but I kind of enjoyed them. Lion-O versus He-Man and Tiger Zord versus that... Oh, what was the name of that Gundam mech?
Epion.
Epion, that's it, yes.
And speaking of silly but awesome, Hercule versus Dan.
Oh yeah, that was a good one for comedic value.
Yeah, occasionally the humor in Death Battle falls right on its face, we'll get into that. But sometimes... it is, as Guy Fieri would say, on point.
Indeed.
I cannot believe I just quoted that pretentious walking ball of hair gel.
Well, whilst we have some venom in us, least favourite.
Do you want to bring up the only time I would ever chance to call Death Battle biased, or should I?
Well, to leave you, might as well bring them back. Yang versus Tifa.
Yeah, I have issues with this battle for a number of reasons. I mean, I've since started watching Ruby, and it's dumb fun, and I admit, I like Yang, but her powers are f***ing stupid.
Yeah.
Also, Screw Attack and Rooster Teeth are affiliates. You don't seriously think that the Crew of Death battle was going to chance humiliating a Rooster Teeth series on their channel? And third, this was during Season 2 or 3, so Yang's powers were not even close to developed at that point.
Yeah, well, they had gotten to the point where it was towards the end of Season 2, and that was when they explained Yan's powers, but it's kind of the problem I have with Ruby right now, is that they've barely explained anything with the battles. Like, it's only in Season 4 that even visually they've implied, oh yeah, aura's a thing, we can now show when it's depleted, or even how the bloody hell it works after time.
yeah, it's not quite X-Blade's level of narratophobia, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah, and like I said, the reason I normally am not someone who complains about the result of a death battle is that normally they argue it in such a way that I can look at it and go, okay, yeah, even though I prefer the other character, I can kind of see where you're coming from with that. But in that case, the logic was a bit wonky. First off, there was, yes, Tifa can suplex a dragon, but apparently it doesn't count because it's only in limit breaks, so that can't be a base strength, even though we also did the example from Advent Children where she threw clouds several miles into the air.
Yeah, so hard he formed a mock cone. And might I add, not only did they completely ignore their own factoid, they also made one up almost out of whole cloth for Yang. I believe the example was Yang tanking being thrown through a stone wall, but the problem was they calculated as though she was thrown from the top down, not through the very thin horizontal cross section.
Yeah, like, your description's making it sound generous. It wasn't a brick wall. It was a pillar under a bridge. It was like, what, 2 inches thick?
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've seen Street Fighter characters tank harder hits than that.
But yeah, aside from that one, there have been other death battles which have been... It's not so much to do with the result, it's just more the much weaker presentation of it. To be honest, Season 3, it started off strong with stuff like Dante vs Bayonetta and Ratchet and Clank, but then it kind of dipped off and started having battles which you could kind of tell who the victor was a mile away because they did not address the very obvious reason why that matchup would be a bad idea. Here, we have Bowser versus Ganondorf. Okay, so does Bowser have a way around Ganondorf's Bane of Evil? No! Okay.
Does Scout have a way around Tracer's time manipulation? No? Okay, carry on, I guess. Also, speaking of Scout versus Tracer, I loved the pre-battle stuff, but the actual battle was a mess.
Oh god, yeah.
Scout cannot attack during invincibility. That battle should have ended 2 minutes earlier than it did.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And that's the other thing that happened weirdly through Season 3, is that, okay, some things get exaggerated with factoids, fair enough, but there were things that were being exaggerated to the point where even from the game footage you can tell it's nowhere near that powerful. The example I'm thinking of, and Sven knows what's coming, tornado hammers.
Oh god.
That tornado, Amy's not special in creating tornadoes. For the love of God, both Sonic and Shadow can do it, and I noticed that neither of them felt the need to bring it up then. Second, it's not that powerful. In the game, the best it can do is knock off a shield, and they're claiming that, she can just create a tornado that's so powerful it lifts up freaking arcade cabinets into the air.
Yeah. If you want to talk about exaggerating abilities, Yang vs. Tifa was not the only example, it was just the start of them.
Yeah, so...
Also, we don't talk about Mewtwo versus Shadow.
Oh, God. That's another one of matchups that probably shouldn't have happened. Can Shadow actually get around Mewtwo's psychic abilities? No? Well, this battle's kind of humiliating.
Yep, curb stomp time. Also, speaking of bias, I really get the sense that the Death Battle team really don't like Shadow. Mind you, I don't blame them, but they're supposed to be objective in these matters.
Yeah, that's a point. I mean, even they said if it becomes a popularity contest, there's no point in doing it.
Yeah, it's just that I think the series has been going on for so long they've kind of lost sight of practicing what they preach.
Yeah, that's true. But, like I said, we still enjoy the concept of Death Battle, and even with our griping, we still tune in week to week. We just kind of hope that Season 4 is a return to form, because, yeah, Season 3 had a good start, then was okay, and then kind of ended on, let's be honest, it was a massive comedy episode rather than an actual season finale.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind that, but it wasn't exactly a battle, and they admitted that. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, it was just, well, here's a thing.
Yeah, and the thing with that thing is, that's one hell of a phrase I just said, I only like Deadpool when he's played by Ryan Reynolds, so it was kind of awkward.
Yeah. But yeah, again, hopefully Season 4 will be a return to quality. If not, well, I guess that's what the fan-best Death Battles on DeviantArt is for.
Yeah, and I mean, Death Battle is one of those things where there are no real characters or plot to get attached to, so we'll probably end up still watching. I have faith that they'll at least put out at least a couple good episodes.
That's true. And occasionally when they get good animators, the fights themselves are still enjoyable. I mean, like I said, I still enjoyed Ken versus Terry, because that was really well animated with the sprites they use.
Yeah, and Hulk vs. Doomsday was visually awesome, even though that was another case of, can the Hulk get past the fact that Doomsday is literally invincible to everyone but Superman?
Yeah.
The answer is clearly no.
Indeed, yes. Oh, and I can't believe we went this long without mentioning Goku vs. Superman 2.
Yeah, I'm kind of impressed that it went that long unaddressed as well. Basically, I'll just leave off by saying that battle should never happen. It was just fan service for people that not even the crew likes.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, let's move quickly on before we suddenly remember something else we wanted to talk about.
I'm even more disappointed in myself. Guts vs. Nightmare.
Oh yes, that was also a good one.
Our next question from IZ reads,
Do's and don'ts for writing romance.
Do you want to go first?
Well, I'll start things off by saying, please, for the love of God, don't do anything that Tite Kubo did with Ichigo and Orihime. I'm still pretty sure that I have literary syphilis after that.
Yeah, in order to translate that for those who don't read Bleach, don't make the pairing come out of nowhere, and please don't make it that the character is overly clingy and loses all agency around each other.
Yeah, basically, don't make it stunningly one-sided. Like, I mentioned this in our Bleach review, but Orihime became a blithering idiot within 5 feet of Ichigo, and it was just as detrimental as it sounds.
Yeah, on that note, I will also add another don't for writing romance: don't make it the sole focus of a character. This is something that, admittedly, it happens in the West too, but anime seems to be particularly bad for it, writing a character that exists solely to be someone's boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah, I could mention something about Cosette from the musical edition of Les Miserables, but I will hedge away from that. That is thin ice I'm treading.
Indeed, yes. As some do's, make them adorable. That's one thing I can say.
Yeah, obviously, and to flip one of the don'ts on its head, please give them equal agency and relevance in the plot, and it doesn't even have to be relevance in combat. One character can be non-combatant and one can. Make it a two-sided thing, because that should be what romance is, otherwise you're in for a very miserable marriage.
Indeed, and I guess also another do would be remember that whilst they are equal agency, they can turn to support each other because, well, that's kind of what couples do.
Yeah, it's kind of the point. Also, speaking of just shallow, superficial things, please do write battle couples and back-to-back badasses.
Indeed, or even if it's not a battle couple, just especially if you're a spouse, don't have a wife be the roadblock. Like, one of the reasons I freaking love Ken and Eliza as a parent in Street Fighter is because Eliza basically respects the fact that Ken is a Street Fighter and often encourages him to do it. In fact, one of my favourite scenes in the original Street Fighter 4 is that Ken receives a letter from Ryu inviting him to a Street Fighting tournament, and Ken's going, okay, I can't do this, he's pregnant, I'll get in touch with Ryu and say sorry I can't make it, and Eliza just kind of mentions, Ken, it's Ryu. We're not going to get a message out to him. Plus, I can see you want to go, so go ahead. We'll be fine for a few months or so.
Speaking of that example, big note, please do not write marriage as if it is the end of independent life.
Yeah, that is, another reason why I like Ken and Eliza, because it goes way beyond that. But, yeah, I believe those are the best examples I can come up with off the top of my head, so just let them be characters, let them support each other, and of course, make them adorable.
Yes, and as one last note, please do not pull a George R.R. Martin and make the romance based entirely on bonking.
That too, actually.
I mean, it might be fun, I admittedly have no experience in that, but there has to be more depth. Please do not pull a Game of Thrones.
Indeed, yes. And we'll now move on to Izzy's final question for this podcast.
What are some unique uses of theme music you've seen?
That's a good question. Theme music power-ups come to mind. Also, there was that one point in Final Fantasy X where To Xanarkand was kind of used as rally/important plot point music, which was kind of what solidified my love for that song, even though Final Fantasy X was silly.
Yeah, I can see that. I can think of several examples of music powers, but I can only think of a handful of unique cases, and the first I can touch on quickly because we've mentioned it a couple of times. That moment when Ichigo's power-up music was cancelled out by Aizen's raising two fingers to block his sword.
The f*** you attack.
Basically, yeah. The second, which is admittedly kind of a strange one, well, first off, it's from Metal Gear Solid 3, so you can imagine how strange it is.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, basically, you're going through this underground tunnel and you come across a ladder that takes you up towards the surface, and then, bizarrely, as you're climbing this ladder, which is pretty long on its own, you suddenly hear the vocals of the game's theme song, and only the vocals.
Most epic ladder climb ever.
Yeah, it's really weird. You're just climbing up this ladder, and then you just hear in the background,
I give my life, not for honor, but for you.
Like I said, most oddly scenic ladder climb ever.
yeah, from what I hear, some people say that this is meant to be a transition from Act 1 to Act 2, and given that everything after that has been a little bit darker than it's been previously, I can believe it.
That's certainly one unique way to signal a tone shift.
Yeah, basically. And the last one is, from all things, a show I haven't mentioned in a long time on this podcast. Kamen Rider W. Or Double, or however the hell you're supposed to pronounce it.
Oh wow, it has been a while. I forgot you even mentioned that show on MB.
Yeah, it's something that happens in the second to last episode. Oh, how do I say this without spoilers?
Take your time.
When it looks like that the central pairing may be broken up for long and complicated reasons, in the moments when they're actually saying goodbye to each other, a slower acoustic version of the Kamen Rider W theme song starts playing. It kind of felt right for the moment because the opening theme song, which it's always been okay, but it's always been kind of ridiculous. But it's the song about these two characters being one crime-fighting unit. In fact, the main chorus goes WBX2 in one body and soul. So it kind of made sense for a somber version of that to play out whilst the Fellowship was breaking up, for lack of a better term. And yeah, it did kind of make that moment a lot more touching.
I bet. In fact, that actually sounds a lot like that To Xanarkin moment I mentioned earlier, because that was kind of the low point of the game where that song played. I won't say anything else because, like your second example, I would spoil everything.
Indeed, yes. But yeah, those are the only examples I can think of off the top of my head. Sven, do you have any more to add? Or?
No, I think you've just about covered it.
Okay then. Then it's time for us to move on.
Our next question comes from the Immortal Toon Junkie, and it's a question directed specifically at you, Jonin.
How does that mask stay on your face? Do you use glue?
Glue. Ah, you're funny. That'd be absolutely ridiculous. No, I use a see-through material to act as the headband. Anyway, moving on. To Junkie's next question, and the final one of this episode.
I seek to study under Samuel the Great Lizard Blizzard Wizard, but I can't seem to find his tower. Do you know where he has hidden it?
I'm sorry, I'm distracted by that pun.
Yeah.
Well, given that he's a lizard blizzard wizard, that is the best term I've ever heard in my entire life. You might be able to use some sort of ice magic tracking. That's the closest thing I can approximate to an actual answer, but if all else fails, I can point you to Alistan, my fellow lizard blizzard wizard contact in Cody, Wyoming, but be warned, it's gonna be cold, so bring a parka. That was all the silliness that I have been bottling up ever since the election.
Yeah, I would offer to help out, but sadly the only contact I know is a salamander. Anyway...
Pretty sure those are amphibians, too. Before this conversation gets any weirder...
That's all the questions for this month. As always, keep them coming because, as we've just demonstrated, they make some of the best and weirdest conversations in this show.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate them, especially the illustrious Toon Junkie scenarios.
Indeed, yes. But now it's time for us to move on to our next segment, which normally is review. But since this is a new year with new possibilities, we decided to do a wild radical change, and it's actually based on an old abandoned idea which Sven has already alluded to, and he was also the one that came up with the idea for it. Hence why this new section is called Crusader Countdowns!
That was possibly the coolest big voice I've heard yet, and I swear that's not just because my name was in it.
Oh yeah, so Sven, given that this section has your name in it, why don't you introduce it?
So, like I alluded to in our Death Battle segment during the Q&A, we attempted to do something similar to this a while back. That is, various countdowns based on various things, like the top 10 best and worst Game of Thrones moments, and the top 10 death battles. That project fell through horribly because, like I said, when it comes to paying attention to things that aren't MB, we suck. So, this is sort of a way of reviving that for those months that we really haven't watched, played, or read anything spectacular. And to start things off, I figured I would bring up to Jonin a subject that has been flitting around my mind for the last few months, mostly on the grounds that I've been listening to a certain song from a certain game. We'll get into that. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to the section I like to call the Top 10 Boss Fights.
Oh, yes. Now, I should split in mind that when we say top 10, what we actually mean is top 5, but separated between the two of us, because whilst me and Sven do share some particular favourites, we wanted each countdown to be separate, and thankfully, the two of us have wide enough variances in terms of tasting games that we've got two very creative top 5s.
Yeah, or at least I like to think so.
Indeed. So, Sven, again, your name's in the title. I'm bringing it all down on you to start us off.
Man, I'm not used to this much responsibility. Top 5, Gaspard from Dark Cloud 2. I seem to recall that in my various Bleach reviews, I have mentioned several times how not to do the alas poor villain effect. I mention those moments because the developers of Dark Cloud 2 kind of spoiled me. Gaspard in Dark Cloud 2 is sort of the dragon, to use TV tropes terms, sort of the heavy in terms of the plot, and as it turns out in his final 2 battles, not quite as much of a monster as we thought. For reference, he sort of plays the same role as Darth Vader, which is fitting because his boss is voiced by Mark Hamill.
Huh.
And in Gaspard's final 2 boss fights in the game, we sort of learn of his tragic backstory, get a sense of the fact that yes, he does have some sort of sense of honor, and then of course we're forced to fight him. Twice. Because after he decides he's had enough of this his boss hijacks his body, turns him into a monstrosity, and forces us to put him down. Which, for one, as far as dick moves goes, yeah, good job on that one, Emperor Griffin. And second, after what we've learned, it has a lot of weight in the plot, and a lot of effect as a boss fight, and it doesn't hurt matters any that Gaspard's design is just awesome.
And I'm just looking at that for myself, and oh wow, it is pretty impressive. Voiced by Mark Hamill, you say?
This character specifically is not, but he is voiced by a very famous X-Men voice actor. They got a star cast for Dark Cloud 2.
Wow.
Which is surprising, because Dark Cloud 2 just kind of faded out of everyone's minds without ever having made any waves, which is a shame, because that story did things to my feelings. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, in fact, I'm trying to remember, did it even get released in Europe?
I think it did, but it may have been under the name of Dark Chronicle. It was kind of confusing. Let me check.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember that now.
But, yeah, just overall, a bit of appreciation for Dark Cloud 2, and not even probably, definitely my favorite antagonist from that game, whose death is so tragic even the character whose father he murdered feels sorry for him at the end.
Okay, that's a pretty good start. Now I guess I better do the same for my list. Number 5, I've been umming and ahhing about this one because it was a close contest between 2 bosses, one of which I liked for story reasons, the other one I liked purely for mechanical reasons, honestly. And even now I'm still umming and ahhing about which one I should give it to.
Quick, coin flip, or DS cartridge flip, as Proton John once did.
But, you know me, story kind of edges up mechanics, and considering it led to one of my favourite moments in that game, that's not it. The final round against Hazama from Blaze Blue Continuum Shift.
Ah yes, Hazama, a character whose villainy and story role even I can appreciate as someone who sucks at fighting games.
Yeah, basically, for those who don't know, Hazama, well, he's pretty much a sadistic bastard. Like, some people call him the internet troll, but that's putting it really lightly. This is a guy who stares at all of the stuff that the Joker did in The Dark Knight and just goes, "That's it? What, you just killed his girlfriend, burned his face, and broke his belief in justice? Come on, you could have made him suffer a bit more than that. No, I'll tell you what you could do. You make him kill the girlfriend by telling him it was all right all along, then reveal just how badly he sucks, and then force him to burn his face, then..."
That's basically the sum of it from what I've heard. Hazama is kind of a dick.
Yeah, and on top of that, the continuum shift in, again, what is a great way of merging mechanics with the story. Basically, the continuum shift is a time loop that explains why characters are replaying the same versions of multiple stories and fighting each other over and over and over again in this specific moment in time. And it's kind of revealed, I should mention that this is endgame spoilers, but it's kind of revealed towards the end of continuum shift that the reason the Hazama is outwitting everyone is because he's the only one who remembers each and every part of the time loop.
Wow, that might be the worst part of all.
Yeah, so he's actively outwitting everyone to the point where, when you get into the final story, even he's starting to get bored. But something happens where, I won't go into details because it's spoilery and would take way too long to explain. But basically, Ragnar gets something which allows him to not only upgrade his power-up, but break through the villain's power-up. And this is where it gets interesting, because you know you've created a great villain when the most satisfying moment is not just the fact that Ragnar gets a power-up and kicks 7 kinds of ass, which it is, especially since it comes with a theme music power-up in the form of the game's opening theme song, Ragnarok, which plays throughout the entirety of the fight.
Awesome.
But the most satisfying moment in that conversation is when Ragnar starts activating his power-up and Hazama goes, "We went through this, are you dumb?" And then Ragnar activates the second level and Hazama's response is, "What?"
The best.
That one response from the guy who has planned out literally every second, the one instance in life Hazama is not in control, is the most satisfying thing in the entire game.
I can imagine. That sounds pretty fantastic. That sounds satisfying from here, and I haven't even played the game.
Yeah, so the reason why it's in number 5 is because that moment itself is incredibly satisfying, but then one of BlazBlue's problems is it often likes to make it come around so that the villain's able to use it to their advantage in the end, but Hazama's final battle in BlazBlue Continuum Shift gets my number 5 spot.
Excellent choice. Now, moving on to our number 4, Kuja from Final Fantasy IX. Yeah, you knew Final Fantasy IX was going to show up. Just as a brief side stream here, this list is probably going to go back and forth between 2 types of boss fights, and the ones that meet in the middle. Really, really visually and technically awesome boss fights, and boss fights that, for the most part, rely on pure awesome factor. And, well, let's just say that Kuja is my favorite Final Fantasy villain for a number of reasons. For 1, he's a ham. For 2, he's affable. For 3, he actually succeeds. And for 4, his boss fight is awesome. Also, his boss music is equally fantastic. And, this basically is, well, I would say this is basically the end of the game, because then we get the bullshit that is Necron, but we don't talk about Necron. This to me is the final battle of my favorite Final Fantasy game with my favorite Final Fantasy villain, and it delivers just as much as advertised. Because you're facing the Kuja who blew up an entire planet, and you get to win.
Yeah, it's been a while since I played Final Fantasy IX. In fact, I don't know how far I got because I remember my disc was scratchy, but I do remember Kuja being a really effective villain.
Yeah, and I hear people who hype up Kefka as the ultimate Final Fantasy villain. For one, I suspect those people have a good deal of Joker envy, because Kefka is basically just the Joker. And for 2, Kefka didn't win. Kuja did. And for his effectiveness as a villain, the impact he makes, generally his entire character, and the fact that you are fighting a planet buster, only slightly discounted by the fact that Kuja's fashion sense is absolutely horrible, I give Kuja from Final Fantasy IX my number 4 spot. Which, if you know me, like I said, is really not surprising, because I'm a Kuja fanboy and a Final Fantasy fanboy forever. I mean, a Final Fantasy IX fanboy forever.
Indeed, that is a good pick, and I think I can live with his design. I mean, effeminate villains does seem to be Final Fantasy's thing, and it could be worse. It could be Seymour.
Oh, sweet Jesus, it could be Seymour. That being said, I do like Kuja's design. His hair is, as they say, on fleek. And I like the feathers, but that f***ing thong!
But yeah, I better match that, and I'm moving to a more mechanical boss fight now, but you bring up Final Fantasy IX, which is a game near and dear to your heart. I'm bringing up something similar. Captain K. Rool from Donkey Kong Country 2.
Yeah, I love this boss too, and I would have put him on my list if, well, we didn't have to divide these things.
Yeah, basically. Captain K. Rool, yeah, in terms of story, it's pretty predictable. Final boss, you're gonna face him anyway, but my god, even to this day, it's not even just a case of, oh, you were a child, he was tough then. No, I've gone back and played him. He is still a challenge to this day, because, well, it's partially an endurance fight because there are so many phases, but also the fact that he keeps continuously changing his tactics, because first it's the cannonballs, Then it's the cannonballs that bounce. Then it's the cannonballs that spin in the air. Then there's the various gases, the ones that slow you down, the ones that change controls, the one that freeze you in place. And then he goes invisible because I don't think you've been having quite a hard time yet.
Yeah, I mean, Hazama is a douchebag for story reasons. Captain K. Rool is a douchebag for technical reasons. This guy is a bastard.
Yeah, you really have to be top of your game in terms of platforming, because even the slightest mistake will cost you a lot in this battle. If you're thrown out of timing, it can be really hard to recover, especially since they don't give out those DK battles very often.
No, and also he changes tactics literally on the turn of a dime, so if you're not expecting them ahead of time, oh, you're in for a lot of respawns.
Indeed, especially since, compared to Donkey Kong Country's Gangplank Galleon theme, which is like a really positive rock solid show that, yeah, this is the end, you can do it, DKC2 is, as I mentioned in one of my older countdowns of Donkey Kong music, Captain K. Rool's boss theme, it's a really intimidating piece, and one that kind of sums up that ultimately, you don't even really win against Captain K. Rool. You merely survive, because the only reason you win is that you knock him down enough times to allow DK to break free of his ropes and punch him through the ship.
Yeah, so, again, like with Kuja, the villain wins. Well, not technically wins, but you don't exactly win the boss fight.
Indeed, yes. So, for continuing to challenge me throughout the entirety of my life, I am more than happy to place Captain K. Rool in my number 4 spot.
Another excellent choice. Now, moving on, it's funny you should mention ridiculously hard boss fights, because my number 3 spot goes to one of the most infamous final bosses in Pokemon for a number of reasons. Getsus from Pokemon Black and White.
Oh.
Now, we mentioned characters being complete douchebags, and this guy really wants to take the cake. I mean, we're talking someone who, according to Word of God and supplementary materials, stole in as a child and abused him his entire life so as to make a puppet king. And his boss fight thoroughly reflects this heavy role in the story because he is fucking difficult.
Yeah, you keep in mind, you've already come off a tough boss battle against said Puppet King N, and considering he had a legendary Pokemon in his team, you think, oh god, this is tough enough already, but hey, we've done it. Then Geffish shows up, and then just when you think he's gonna rant and roar, he goes, you know what, I'm challenging you to a Pokemon battle, and yeah, he has some pretty powerful Pokemon on his team. You've got stuff like Bafurant, who is this literal massive ball with a high attack stat, and then you have Hydreigon.
Oh god, Hydreigon, that thing, legitimately, on my first playthrough for Pokemon Black, destroyed my entire team, except for Reshiram. I won using a Reshiram with a sliver of health left, and I felt like I ran a marathon.
It's really tough. It's one of those things where, unless you're prepared for dragon types, or specifically a dark dragon type, you are gonna really struggle against this guy. And we're just scratching the surface. He's got plenty of powerful Pokemon on his team that either have high attack stats or are difficult walls to get through.
Yeah, I mean, you have his Kafagrigus, which is exquisitely difficult to take down. Same with, Seismitoad, which is another wall. You have Bouffalont, who will just flat out wreck your but none of them compare to Hydreigon. If you look up this thing's stats, you will see that there are really no weaknesses. High speed, high special attack, high physical attack, and solid defenses. And furthermore, you have to wonder how Getsus ended up with a Hydreigon before Hydreigon is meant to evolve.
I'm sure he has found many ways, and I should also mention that, again, different types of music. This is another one of those things where you've had positive, encouraging music before now, and his theme. Oh god, his theme.
It's terrifying. Just this constant droning drum beat and chorus line. Just to remind you, in case you forgot, that this is in fact the darkest boss fight in Pokemon yet.
I remember reading a comment by Nintendo Capri-san on, I believe it was Lucajin's blind Let's Play of the game. It was, and I quote, "Oh god, that music. It sounds like you're wandering into the lair of a beast and hoping to the love of God you don't wake it up."
That is a perfect metaphor for that. That being said, if you need a ray of light to cling to throughout the boss battle, just imagine that the chanting choristers are saying Dennis over and over again.
Well, at least you can die of a smile thinking that.
Yeah, and trust me, unless you are very, very lucky, you are going to be doing a lot of dying. So, for both mechanics, difficulty, and basically flat-out evil, I give my number 3 spot very solidly to Getsus.
In my case, I move on to number 3, and it's kind of funny. We're developing links between these, even though we did not plan it. I was always going to fit a boss battle for the Tales of series on here somewhere. And I was thinking through the multiple one-on-one duels that have existed throughout, but then I realized, actually, you know what? No. There is one battle that is very fun mechanically, even if it is kind of easy, and is actually really amazing from the story standpoint. Tiamat from Tales of Zestria.
Now, this is actually a surprise entry to me, because I have the list that we'd worked on earlier in the break up right now, and it's nowhere on this, so this is going to be kind of blind going into this, number 3.
Yeah,
go on.
I will admit, the next 2 entrants I've kind of added in last minute, but
Fair enough, I'm very excited.
Okay, Tiamat is kind of interesting, so okay, without getting into too much of the techno-babble, most of the villain's plan revolves around developing maleficence, negative emotions, basically. And the way they plan to do that is by starting a war. Our heroes return to the battlefield to find that the malevolence has already begun to set in on the battlefield, and it first starts off with this terrifying anime cutscene which shows that the soldiers' fear and hatred towards each other is grown so on that the soldiers are transforming into monsters mid-battle and attacking each other.
Wow, that's pleasant, and also I hear an average Tuesday night in eastern Ukraine.
Oh, but it gets worse, because in the middle of this, a seraph, who is kind of like a spirit people, is on the battlefield. And when a human from a physical realm turns into a monster, that's already kind of bad. When a seraph is exposed to too much malevolence, they turn into a giant dragon, which everyone can see.
So, basically mass oh crap?
Indeed, yes. So, our heroes charge in, saying that they pretty much have to fight, especially since one of them, Saray, is deemed to be the shepherd, i.e. the chosen one his job is to fight this, and he manages to rescue a bunch of soldiers who are also characters from earlier in the story, and he tells them to get to safety whilst he and the others fight off this dragon. And it starts off in 3 phases. The first is starting the dragon battle, and again, it's not the hardest boss in the world, but, you know, sometimes it's not so much the difficulty of a boss battle that matters, it's the fact that it's a giant hulking dragon.
Yeah, and the words of a series that I cannot remember, but I know it was said in something that I watched. It's a f***ing dragon.
Yeah, so you're facing against this giant hulking monstrosity, and then when you get its HP down a bit, you get a cutscene where the soldiers of both sides and many of the other important NPCs are kind of staring up at this, and initially their reaction is the understandable, well, crap, we're not going to win against this thing.
Yeah, that's very reasonable.
But then they kind of notice that Soray and the others are still fighting against this thing, and it kind of slowly turns to admiration, because then the battle continues until, again, a third of his HP goes down. Then the really epic part comes in, because just as the heroes are thinking, okay, we might be in trouble, I don't know if we can hold out against this much longer, The dragon is hit by a barrage of arrows. Our heroes turn round, and two things happen. One, the knights declared that they are going to support Soraya in the battle against the dragon and the other monsters from the sidelines. And two, the song Rising Up kicks in.
I seem to recall this song.
Yeah, it's this big, bombastic vocal ballad that sings about never giving up and rising above the challenge. And yes, when you listen to it on its own, the lyrics are unbelievably cheesy, but who the hell cares? You are fighting this gigantic dragon with a big power ballad behind you, whilst two sides who were at each other's throats before are uniting to help you combat the dragon because they recognize you as a hero. I don't even know the knights actually do anything throughout the battle, but the fact that it's happening at all, even if it's just random voice clips in the background, just makes the moment that much more epic when you get to that fight.
Wow, and it's worth emphasizing here, you're doing this to the tune of cheesy J-Rock. That is just my kind of poison.
Indeed, so, like I said, it's not the hardest battle in the world, but in terms of just the atmosphere, story pacing, and the fact that, again, you're having the catharsis of fighting this gigantic dragon at a very pivotal point in the story, which, again, it not only ends the war between the two nations, but also has everyone officially recognize Soraya as the Chosen One. It's just so epic.
Yeah, that just sounds purely awesome.
That is why it's at my number 3 spot.
Very reasonable. Now, speaking of plot impact and amazing music, moving on to number 2 is an entry that will surprise absolutely no one who is a fan of this series or who knows us in any way. Number 2, the Black Knight from Fire Emblem 9 Path of Radiance.
Ah, and of course. In fact, the only reason this is not on my list is because we needed to divide it.
Yeah, this is the guy who basically more or less makes the actual main villain of Fire Emblem 9 look like a complete joke. He's an intimidating presence, he's a complete enigma, he kills Ike's badass father at the start of the game, and he has been a lingering threat for about 19 chapters at this point. And this is the final showdown, once and for all, with this monstrous beast of a day in general. And first of all, this is going to be a running theme with my last 2 entries. His boss theme is absolutely epic. Jonah can back me up on here. This is actually an excellent use of altered theme music because it's just sort of a sped up, more dramatic version of the Black Knight's theme. It's really intense and gets you really hyped up for taking this guy down. For 2, like gets this, he is stupidly friggin' hard.
Oh yeah, especially since it's a test of skill in the truest sense of the word, because you can lose this fight. There is actually alternate cutscenes and story paths for you losing the fight and not actually finishing it in time.
Yeah, and of course, as always in Fire Emblem, you can die horribly, but if you don't take this guy out in 5 turns, you're left with a sense of defeat. You did not accomplish any sort of real victory against the Black Knight. A character has apparently died to get you out of this jam, and it really feels like, after all this time, a legitimate defeat on the part of the Grail mercenaries, which, it affects you! It really affects you, and that, to me, is the sure sign of a good story moment.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. It is the perfect way to just cap off the feuds between Ike and the Black Knight as to be going on throughout, the entirety of the game. I mean, it's revisited later in Radiant Dawn, and whilst it's good there, it's nowhere near as good as this. It was a hard act to follow.
Yeah, it really was. There is a reason why anyone who has played through the Fire Emblem games and Path of Radiance always lists this as the #1 boss fight in Fire Emblem, and frankly, I agree. Nothing before it topped it, nothing after it has topped it, and the Black Knight just generally being one of the coolest villains in Fire Emblem is the icing on the cake. So, I know at this point you're probably wondering what could possibly beat this entry, but we'll get into that. Number 2 goes to the Black Knight from Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, who occasionally midnights as Fud Knight.
And for my second choice, this is also a last-minute entry, but it's entirely because I fought this guy a couple of days ago. See, I got Metal Gear Solid 3 as a Christmas present, and I came up to this boss battle, and I'm so glad I did. And, again, amazing unintentional links, because this is one where you can also have a hollow victory depending on certain circumstances, but I'll get into that in a moment. The boss battle in question is The End, from, obviously, Metal Gear Solid 3. Now, this one purely comes down to mechanics, because, honestly, The End, on his own, is just a unique member of the mini-boss squad. He is a very old soldier who is basically at death's door, but saves his energy for every single battle because he wants to live the last moments of his life in the heat of battle and have a good, honourable match against Naked Snake. Now, what I'm about to say next, I feel a bit cheap for, because it's 2 words I know will instantly get Sven interested in this boss battle. Sniper duel.
Holy shit. Please, go on.
Yeah, The End, basically his character gimmick is that he is named many times throughout the game as the grandfather of sniping, or the grandfather of modern sniping, I should say. And his entire boss battle is set across 3 mini-maps, and you can probably tell where this is going. He will be silently moving around the location to the next sniper points, and he is constantly moving throughout these 3 mini-maps, using his camouflage to blend into the surroundings, and obviously firing on you from a distance. It's up to you to figure out where he is, and then, well, there are multiple ways to take him down, and this is why he's rated so high, because, yeah, the storylines of Metal Gear Solid can be batshit insane at times, but one amazing thing that I always will praise Kojima for is that he gives you so many ways in order to take out individual minions and bosses, and this is no exception, because one way you can do it is to do the classic sniper duel thing of getting into your own sniping spot and then try to pick him off first by scanning the horizons through your scope. And whilst that is satisfying, the other ways you can do it is you can try and lure him out by either running through the jungle like a blind idiot and then diving behind cover when he starts shooting you and using that to track his position. If you're a sadist, you can find his pet parrot and hold it hostage.
Oh my god!
You can then also use your tracking devices, such as the thermal goggles or the directional mic, to try and figure out where he is, and then sneak up behind him and start shooting him that way. And when you do, you better be quick, because if you get too close to him and he notices you, he starts pulling out flash grenades.
Wow.
And amazingly as well, there's something you can do, which I wasn't able to do, and part of me is tempted to go back and try. If you sneak up on him 3 times and hold him at gunpoint, you can eventually force him to give up the camo suit he's wearing, which is actually one of the best camouflage gears you can get in the game, from what I've been told, so...
That's awesome, and I want to play MGS3 just for this.
Indeed. It's definitely one of the best Metal Gear Solid games, but believe it or not, all of this is good on its own, but it gets even better because, okay, like I said, there are multiple ways you can win this fight, some of which break the 4th wall. One which, again, I want to play this boss fight again, partially because of the camo thing, but also admittedly because I kind of cheated and used a secret code I found out about because he was giving me a lot of trouble. If you're really stuck and can't tell where he is, you can go into the start menu, open the map, and use the Konami code to reveal his location.
That is genius. That is genius. I love it.
Yeah, and there is also the last level I'm going to mention is I mentioned that you can actually fail this boss fight in a way, and this is also another brilliant bit of fourth wall breaking, because if you try to save the game mid-boss battle, the character who is in charge of your saving goes, "Are you sure you want to? I have a feeling something bad could happen." If you save the game and come back to it the next day, it's fine. However, if you leave it for 2 days, the instant you reload the game, you get a cutscene where, because the game treats saving as going to sleep, you get a cutscene where Snake arouses from his nap only to get hit by the edge with a tranquilizer dart from miles away, and the head just going, "You disappoint me. Going to sleep in the middle of a battle like that."
Knowing Kojima's tendencies and the fact that Armstrong exists, I was fully expecting you to say that you go to sleep and 2 days later you wake up and the end has died of old age.
Actually, funnily enough, if you leave it for a week, that is exactly what happens.
Kojima, you ridiculous motherfucker.
That's exactly it. If you take too long in that boss battle, if you literally put the game down for about a week, he dies of old age. And Naked Snake actually expresses disappointment that all he wanted was one last great jewel, and I failed him. And literally, the only thing that gets him out of it is his commanding officer going, "For God's sake, this is a mission. What, were you trying to get a medal in the Olympics or something?"
That is spectacular. Again, I can only imagine what's going to top that.
Yeah, so... yeah, just for the sheer mechanical brilliance of it, the end gets the number 2 spot.
I cannot believe I preempted that. Okay, after that, I need to compose myself, because this is a very serious review and a very serious plot moment.
Actually, that's a good point. Before we get into the number 1, it's probably for the best that we bring up some honourable mentions, because we do have a small list of that as well.
Yes. Do you want to start or should I?
Since I brought it up, I might as well start this time. Some honourable mentions, i.e. boss battles that we liked but weren't quite good enough to make the top 5. I have Galcian from Skies of Arcadia, Majora from Majora's Mask, Perfect Chaos from Sonic Adventure, Melina from Sonic and the Black Knight, and this was the one that almost made it to number 5, Avion from Shadow of the Colossus.
Awesome. For my part, I have Lig Atlanteus from Fallout New Vegas, who is just terrifying. I have Alistair Azimuth from Ratchet and Clank: A Crack in Time, who Gaspar desperately had to fight for the number 5 position. And lastly, I have Saren from Mass Effect, which I think fulfills my BioWare quotient, elsewise I would put in a dozen Inquisition bosses.
Indeed, yes.
So, moving on from that, I suppose we ought to get to our number 1 spots, and my number 1 should really surprise nobody because I've hyped it up so much in Q&A segments beforehand, but it's still absolutely spectacular. Number 1, Remiel from Tales of Symphonia.
Ah, yes.
I'm gonna get into the music again later on, as I have done a dozen or so times before this point, but just for those of you who have just started watching or who really want this recapped again, because I never get tired of recapping it, Remiel's boss fight is the turning point in Tales of Symphonia. After a whole game of the party watching Colette slowly be dismantled piece by piece in the name of saving Silverant, at the very last moment, her guardian and self-proclaimed father, Remiel, turns around on the party, reveals his villainous intentions, and the fact that, yeah, for all of this trouble, the final reward Colette is going to get as the hero of Silverant is basically to die and become the vessel of Martel. And he seems to take great pleasure in this, as he declares that this will surely get him the promotion he's always wanted, and attacks the party as useless accessories. Thus kicking in my favorite boss theme ever, Beat the Angel, in the most satisfying boss fight I've ever played.
Yeah, and he is a really interesting boss battle, not just for the emotional satisfaction of finally beating him down, but he's a fairly challenging boss battle in the game as well. Like, admittedly, you do fight many guys after him that are more or less scripted boss battles, but Remiel is still pretty challenging on his own for the multiple long-range attacks and, of course, the light magic spells, which he continuously spams.
Yeah, basically, mechanics-wise, dodge a lot or you will have half of your HP taken off by Photon. Admittedly, compared to some of the later bosses in Tales of Symphonia, he's not amazingly challenging, but just the music and the atmosphere and the fact that this motherfucker just betrayed you after all you did for him just gives his boss fight such a wonderful atmosphere. And like I said, it is so satisfying after all the emotional trauma you've gone through to finally pin it on someone and beat his conniving ass into the dust.
Oh, yes.
And like I said, this is also the turning point of Tales of Symphonia. Following this point, the story gets a little darker. Of course, it's not much. It's a Tales of game. It's not going to get that dark. But it gets a little darker, a little more serious, a little more involved. And this fight is basically what takes the game from your average JRPG to something absolutely magical.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's darker, but it's definitely, well, aside from getting to the point where it introduces the second half of the party, it's the part where it kind of breaks out of its rather cliched archetypical plot and starts to develop its own identity, I would say.
Yeah, and I only say darker because after this point, the bosses are a lot more threatening and a lot more serious compared to, the likes of Magnius, who was a friggin' joke.
I think I'd also say that the villains start getting a bit more, maybe not complex, but a bit more layered than, again, the likes of Magnius and even Kavad, let's be honest.
Yeah, basically just a joke and, well, Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah, funnily enough, that was just what I was thinking of.
Man, I'm doing good at that today. But, yeah, for a number of reasons, and for the fond memories of beating this guy's ass after all the shit he put the party through, and for awesome boss music, an awesome atmosphere, and an awesome fight in general, number one goes to Remiel from Tales of Symphonia, a very proud place for a complete asshole.
Indeed. Now, for my number one, might be hard to top it, but I think I've got something. If I was going purely on mechanics, the end would admittedly top this guy, because he has a fairly predictable pattern. He's not especially challenging, but it's a very enjoyable battle that appeals to a particular preference of mine, but it's also very significant story-wise, not just for the game's story, but also the symbolism connected to the rest of the franchise. I am speaking of the final battle against Ganondorf in The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker.
I've been waiting for this one. Please go on.
Okay. First off, to explain what I mean by personal preference, it's a one-on-one sword duel. Well, two-on-one sword duel, but you get the idea. It's a sword duel. Ganondorf whips out two long katanas and he goes up against you with your sword and shield. And I should also mention that I really love the form the combat takes in The Wind Waker.
Yeah, I mean, for a game that's cel-shaded and very cartoony, it's surprisingly realistic and engaged.
Indeed, yes. It's just the sense that all of Link's amazing combos and the parry system, which I'm really sad they didn't bring back in other games, but never mind.
I know, right? It's so cinematic.
Yeah. Also, it's one of those few battles where Ganondorf doesn't feck around. Like, if you try holding up your shield, he just kicks it aside and then starts slashing you, and oh boy, if you're not paying attention, those swords can take off a lot of health.
I seem to recall that.
But, like I said, it's the big symbolism of the fight, because, okay, Wind Waker kind of leans heavily on the fact that it's a sequel to Ocarina of Time, but it makes good use of its sequel traits, especially given that this is a much older Ganondorf, who has distinct memories of stuff from Ocarina of Time, who has been both a monster and the king of the world, and has had his power stripped from him and then regained it again, and he is now on the point of madness because his literal last chance to take over the world has been denied him. Because, at the last moment when he's about to use the wish-granting MacGuffin, not only does someone get to it first, but his wish is to wipe away the Kingdom of Hyrule, which has been sealed at the bottom of the sea. In the King's words, to give Link and Tetra a chance to build their new world. So, let me just rephrase that. You're fighting Old Man Ganondorf, who has gone mad because he's about to lose literally everything on top of his once great tower as it is being washed away by gallons of seawater.
Yeah, that is exactly as cinematic and racked with story depth as it sounds.
Yeah, it is such a beautiful symbolic moment of the past and the future battling each other whilst the remnants of said past are all washing away, and it's just... Man, it is such an epic fight, and it's also one of the first times that Zelda actually gets off her ass and does something. I mean, when you compare it to Ocarina of Time, when Zelda's just standing there and gasping every time you get hit.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much comparison. That boss fight in Ocarina of Time was not her proudest moment.
Yeah, meanwhile, Tetra's getting up and is using the light arrows to hit Ganondorf from a distance, and... yeah, it is pretty damn cool, and the fact is, again, the battle has multiple stages to it, because you start off being able to either smack Ganon or wait until Tetra strikes him with a light arrow so you can start slashing him, but then the second phase of the battle is Ganondorf gets wise to this and smacks Zelda aside, meaning that you have to use your sword skills to fight alone. But then in the third phase, he even gets wise to that and starts actually being able to block the parries, the first boss to be able to do so, I might add. And then the final phase kicks in, which I won't spoil it, but basically you have to use some trickery to land the final blow, and said final blow, admittedly, you've seen Link stab things in the head before, but this is the first time Link actively stabs a human-shaped Ganondorf right through the freaking head.
You could say that Link gives him a piercing headache.
I see what you did there.
God, even I almost wish you didn't. My shitty puns aside, it's awesome. I've seen the cutscene on account of my atrocious attention span. I never actually finished the game, but I've seen the cutscene. It's epic.
Indeed, yes, and honestly, it's just such a perfect conclusion, and it's also part of the reason why I was so against Ganondorf coming back from Twilight Princess is not only was it generic and boring, but this was such the perfect end for Ganondorf. There was literally nowhere you could go from this. You have this wise, older Ganondorf who has lived through all of this before, but he has this one epic battle as the kingdom he had wished so hard to conquer is now disappearing, and as Link lands the final blow, he just accepts his fate, that it's now is the time, and he just smirks. Like, his last quote, "The wind, it is blowing," that in itself is so multi-layered as well. I could spend an entire video about it. Going from that to, hey, look, Ganondorf's back with Twilight Princess, isn't it epic? We've got this ridiculously overly detailed design for him, and it's taking place in the middle of a sunset field. Yep, what do you mean we haven't actually developed any characterization from him? Who cares? It's Ganondorf!
And we threw aside Zant for this very purpose.
Indeed, yes. So, that's pretty much why Ganondorf in Wind Waker gets the top spot from him, because it's a really epic way to finish off your franchise villain, and in fact, in one of the multiple Zelda timelines, that actually was his end, which, yeah, it's just the perfect conclusion. That's all I can say without sounding like a broken record.
Yeah, and to be fair, the fact that it actually is the end of Ganondorf in one timeline kind of makes the whole Twilight Princess thing a little better. Not much, but a little.
Indeed. Although there are still a lot of other issues with it, namely where the hell did they get those Triforce species, but never mind.
Yeah, there are a whole lot of other issues with it, namely the fact that the second half of the game was written by a Japanese Secret Service stand-in.
Callbacks, but yes,
Yes, please do not look back on that video from 2009 that I'm sure even now Jonin is kind of ashamed of, even though it was one of the better old VGT episodes.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, it had good bits, but it also doesn't help that I ranted about the Zelda timeline and it was wrong, but anyway.
Yeah, they proved you wrong by actually releasing it a few years later.
Yeah, anyway, that concludes our countdown, and yeah, I would say we've covered a wide spectrum of games there.
Yeah, I would agree, and please, feel free to discuss this countdown in the comments section below. Let us know what you think of it and whether we should continue it. And yeah, please just share your thoughts on the one big idea I've had for Monkey Broadcast in the last 8 years.
Indeed, and we might as well continue to discuss it as well. If you have a favourite boss battle we didn't mention, which admittedly is probably because we didn't play the game, but never mind. Either way, feel free to share the story with us in the comment section. That's what it's there for. But yeah, before we wrap this up, there's just enough time for one last section, which is...
Quick Fire Reviews!
This is the section where we review something we read, watched or played, but within the maximum time limit of 60 seconds. Sven, do you have anything you want to start with?
I do indeed. I'll cover it quickly because there's not much story involved.
Okay, your time starts now.
Legend of Grimrock, both the first game and the second. Not much story involved here, just kind of an enjoyable, grid-based dungeon crawl, which, like the old 90s-style computer games it's paying tribute to, is really f***ing hard. But, as a masochist, I enjoy it.
Yeah, that sounds like fun, and I've also got one other video game to quickly review, so...
Shantae, Half Genie Hero. I already mentioned this in the VGT New Year's video, but I've now actually finished the game at the time of recording, so I can get started. It's a fun Metroidvania-style platformer that has all the qualities I've liked in the Shantae series, including the fun characters and subtle nods to the continuity, including one amusing conversation where an NPC can't understand if their latest entry in the series is a sequel, soft reboot, or a hard reboot, but anyway. The story structure meant that we didn't really get a solid villain or back-and-forth plot, but the little goofy plans such as counterfeit mermaids were still really enjoyable story beats, and with the promise of character DLC coming out in the near future, I look forward to continuing playing this game.
Awesome. I may have to take you on your word at that, and pick it up at some point.
As far as I'm aware, it's on Steam and Wii U, so... and PS4, so yeah, it should be fairly easy to pick up.
Awesome. I'll look into that. I guess that concludes things.
Yeah, might as well not be around the bush. Yes, that concludes this month's edition of Monkey Broadcast. It's good to be back, and yeah, like I said, hopefully this new year will be a bit more upbeat than the last one.
Yeah, here's hoping.
But yeah, as always, thank you for listening. Feel free to discuss the show or raise questions in the comments. That's what they're there for. But until next time, I have been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. If you, like me, survived 2016, please congratulate yourself. That puts you ahead of a whole lot of people.
That was Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright was misused, send an email to thejoninmonkey@yahoo.co.uk. For more news and media reviews, follow me on Twitter @thejoninmonkey and go to thejoninmonkey.podbean.com for previous podcasts and MP3 downloads. All music used belongs to the original owners. Until next month, have fun, kids!